Okay, we're gonna get started. Feel free to keep your cameras off or keep them on, whatever you prefer. Um, but yeah, I'm Jordan. I am an MFT trainee and an Elevate Youth Counselor here at the Orange County LGBTQ Center. I'm doing this presentation with Brittany, and Laura is going to be um, our room monitor and our chat monitor. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to drop them in the chat and Laura will let us know that they're there. We'll take breaks periodically to answer any of those questions. So as I said before, my name is Jordan. I use she, her pronouns. Brittany also uses she, her pronouns. She is also an MFT trainee here at the center and an Elevate Youth Counselor. And also Laura uses they, them pronouns, and they are also a trainee here at the center. Yeah, we're excited to get started with this trauma-informed series this spring. And yeah, we're excited to share with you. Just to preface, we're going to be using some acronyms throughout this presentation. So cognitive behavioral therapy, we're going to refer to CBT sometimes, and then for trauma-informed or trauma focused, cognitive behavioral therapy, we're going to call TFCBT sometimes. So if you see that anywhere, that's what those mean. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. So the next slide is a pre-test. So if you could just scan the QR code with your phone or a camera and fill out this pre-test. It's only 9 questions. It should only take a couple minutes. So I'll give you all some time to answer these questions. I'll give you all 2 minutes.
And we had one more person just join. Just so you know, we're just filling out this pretest for a couple minutes. So you can scan the QR code and fill that out, and they'll continue moving forward soon.
Okay, so you can all keep working on that if that's what you're doing. That's totally fine. But I'm going to get going with the next slide here. And it's just general objectives of the series. This is a 4-part educational series meant to share trauma-informed approaches within the LGBTQ community. The series consists about learning about childhood trauma, substance abuse, trauma resilience and recovery, all through the lens of trauma-informed cognitive behavioral therapy. The goal for this series is to assist educators, advocates, allies, mental health therapists, counselors, administration, parents, professionals, and anyone else who would come into contact or work with LGBTQ plus population individuals, so that you could do so in a more trauma-informed manner by understanding how a trauma can affect those of this community. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about what we do here at the center. This is the LGBTQ Center at Orange County and the Elevate program, which me and Brittany are a part of. So our mission here is to advocate on behalf of Orange County for individuals that identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or gender questioning, and anybody else in the LGBTQ community, and provide services to ensure their well-being and provide a positive space for their identities. We do this through our youth programs, our community programs and events, mental health and emotional wellness, through trans health and wellness, HIV prevention and awareness, immigration services, advocacy and education, and volunteering opportunities here at the center. Specifically within the Elevate Youth California program, our goal is to reframe substance abuse as a public health issue, and combat the detrimental impact of the war on drugs to the BIPOC and LGBTQ plus identifying youth and young adults. We do so by providing trauma-informed counseling and process groups at no cost to the youth and young adults of the community. And we hope to raise awareness through social media campaigns and activities and events. So if you don't already, I encourage everybody, if you want to, follow the Instagram account. So it's LGBTQ Center OC on Instagram. And yeah, that's where we share a lot of our campaigns, our events, and groups, if you're interested in any of that. Yeah. Oh, it was, can you click on it, Laura? There it is. So yeah, if you want to follow us on Instagram, that's where we post a lot of those events. Awesome. So next slide.
So I'm going to get us started on like what we're actually going to do today in tonight's session. We're going to go over like what is cognitive behavioral therapy as a modality, going through understanding thoughts, core beliefs, get into some interventions, and then go into trauma focus and why it's important when addressing our community. And then we'll follow up with some resources, and then we have a post-test. You will see the CBT triangle on the side, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. This is basically an illustration of like the basis of what CBT is. Your feelings, your emotions impact your behavior, which impact your thoughts. And these are very permeable, go back and forth, and interact with each other. We have the next slide. We get into it a little bit deeper. So when we're encountered a situation, we see it, we collect that information, and your thoughts are kind of like the interpretation of that situation. For example, if a stranger looks at you, angry expression, you could be like, oh, what did I do wrong? Maybe they're having a bad day. And that's going to affect your emotions, your feelings. Happy, sad, worried. These emotions have a physical component, a physical response, a chemical response, like becoming nervous and then becoming, I'm having a stomach ache. And that affects your response to the situation. Actions such as saying something or doing something, removing yourself from the situation. And these all go hand in hand, like I said. If you come up to a situation, you might go with fear first, become nervous, leave the situation, that's behavior, and thoughts come afterwards. So we have our next slide. What is cognitive behavioral therapy? It's a form of psychological treatment that has demonstrated to be effective for a wide range of problems, including depression, anxiety disorders, alcohol and drug use problems, marital problems, eating disorders, and severe mental illness. Cognitive behavioral therapy can be used as a short-term treatment. Usually some treatments last 12 to 18 sessions. And these help individuals learn to focus on present thoughts and beliefs that could lead to long-term change. CBT is used to treat a wide range of mental health disorders, including addiction, anger issues, anxiety, bipolar disorders, depression, eating disorders, trauma-related disorders, which is the subject of our series, panic attacks, personality disorders, and phobias. Cognitive behavioral therapy is very popular because of its evidence-based practices. With a short amount of time, we're able to see these long-term change as opposed to other modalities, which may take some time, years, to see change. We have the next slide. In addition to mental health conditions, CBT has been found to help people cope with the following: chronic pain or illnesses, divorce, breakups, grief and loss, insomnia, low self-esteem, relationship problems, and stress management. CBT is based on several core principles, including psychological problems that are based in part on faulty or unhelpful ways of thinking, which are cognitive distortions. We'll get into that later. Learned patterns of unhelpful behavior within their own culture or society beliefs and norms, and people suffering from psychological problems. They can all learn better ways of coping with them and to become more effective and productive with their lives. By challenging these negative thought patterns, folks can find autonomy within their thoughts, promoting better mental health outcomes on their journeys. So here we have our next slide. CBT treatment usually includes efforts to change thinking patterns. These strategies might include learning to recognize one's own distortions, thinking that they're creating problems, and then learn to reevaluate them in the light of reality. Using problem-solving skills to cope with difficult situations, learning to develop a greater sense of confidence in one's own abilities. Cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on changing automatic negative thoughts that can contribute to and worsen emotional difficulties, depression, anxiety. These spontaneous negative thoughts have a detrimental influence on one's overall mood. And through CBT, these thoughts are identified, challenged, and then replaced with more objective, realistic thoughts, balanced thoughts, to be able to hold the reality that sometimes things are negative, and also that the better outcome is also possible.
Yeah, now I'm going to be going through the thoughts and different thoughts and how we categorize them in cognitive behavioral therapy. So automatic thoughts, those are thoughts that are out of our awareness. And these thoughts are often overlooked, and they become thoughts that we have over and over, and naturally we tune them out. For example, when you're commuting to work or school, for the first time, you might need directions. So you might put it on an app or something like that. And eventually, after doing that a couple of times, you get to the point where you're traveling on autopilot, and you don't look up the directions, you just do. The brain's ability to run on autopilot is important as it frees up resources for other tasks. However, there's a downside to this, and the downside is when it comes to our thoughts running on autopilot, they are happening out of our awareness, and we are not assessing them for accuracy, and can often be accepted as fact, even if they're not accurate. And there's these other categories of thoughts. They're irrational thoughts, otherwise known as cognitive distortions. And I'm going to get into the different types of these with the next slide. But irrational thoughts are thoughts that are often unhelpful guesses about situations, not based on facts, but just based off the situation, and often they do lack evidence. Irrational thoughts are your brain's way of guessing or making sense of situations and circumstances. Sometimes they're accurate, but not always. Over time, they become automatic, And this means that thoughts and beliefs that are not true can shape how you feel and how you behave without you even knowing it. And this is a problem because, like we saw in the cognitive triangle, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all linked. So let's look at the different cognitive distortions on the next slide, and we'll take a deeper dive into this. Cognitive distortions are unhealthy thinking patterns that can lead to the reinforcement of negative thoughts and emotions. These cognitive distortions or mental habits are very common amongst folks within the LGBTQ community. They're often irrational ways of thinking and can also cause us to misinterpret situations. Some of these mental habits can lead us to consistently interpreting situations in unhealthy ways and inconsistent with the facts of the situation, leaving out important parts of the picture. So now it's a skewed picture of reality. So some examples of cognitive distortions are magnification and minimization. This is when we see folks exaggerating or minimizing the importance of events. One might believe that their own achievements are unimportant and think, oh, well, anyone can do it. Or their mistakes are excessively important. For example, only I can make that kind of mistake. And that's making the problem bigger and making it really little. And so that's a cognitive distortion. And the next one, catastrophizing. So this is when someone only sees the worst possible outcome of a situation. And we see this a lot in folks with anxiety-related disorders or agoraphobia. The next one is overgeneralization. This is when folks make a broad interpretation of an event. For example, I did poorly on my presentation. I will always do poorly at presenting. With this overgeneralization, a single incident gets inflated into a perceived larger pattern that probably doesn't exist. And that's a distortion that we see quite often too. The next one is personalization. And that's when the belief that one is responsible for events outside of their own control. For example, my partner is upset. It must be because I didn't do enough to help them. This is another one that's seen consistently with those with trauma. They believe that it's their fault when in reality it isn't. The next one is jumping to conclusions. And this one is interpreting the meaning of the situation with little or no evidence. And we see this when someone mind reads. So that's when they interpret the thoughts and beliefs of others without adequate evidence. For example, she won't go on a date with me. She probably thinks I'm ugly. Which that statement, like, you can't read the other person's mind. So that's not an accurate thought. And then fortune telling is the expectation of a situation will turn out badly without adequate evidence. Again, it's all about that lack of evidence. Emotional reasoning is the assumption that emotions reflect the way that things really are. This can be seen in, I feel anxious, I must be in danger. By being excessively tuned into the way you feel, you make assumptions based off those feelings. And then we see this when another cognitive distortion, when folks discredit the positive, and by recognizing only the negative aspects of a situation while ignoring the positive. So for example, one might receive many compliments on an evaluation, but focus on one single piece of criticism. Another one that's really common in youth are these shoulds. these should statements. The belief that things always need to be a certain way. For example, I should never be sad. I should never be angry. And that it's like an expectation that's placed on them that probably isn't accurate into those statements. Lastly, there is all or nothing thinking. And this is also known as black and white thinking. This is when thinking in absolute, such as always or never or every, become an everyday thing. And so, for example, it's I never do good at a good job at my work. So it's like I'm either all good or all bad. Like I can either be nice or mean, like a trade-off. But these are just a couple examples of these cognitive distortions.
Before we get into more cognitive distortions, we wanted to open up the floor for questionings. We've already gotten into some deep weeds, some good information. Please put anything in the chat and we'll answer them. Or if you're ready to go ahead and put us a thumbs up. And we know we're ready to go. All right, I got one. Okay, we're ready to go. I see a couple. Okay. Then I'm going to keep going. Some common core beliefs in the LGBT community. We're focusing on internalized homophobia and internalized transphobia. Note all of these things kind of overlap on top of each other. And we also want to validate that these things are learned and sometimes have evidence. Sometimes we are not safe in public spaces and facilities don't align to people's genders, workplaces, family members, and it may not be safe. And we want to make sure when we're talking about these things, we are honoring that. We're never discounting somebody's experience or somebody's beliefs because they very well come from a place of truth. Here we have some that are common that we see a lot that you may hear. My sexuality is wrong. No one will like me because I'm queer. I'm unlovable. I'm bad. My friends, my family will never accept me. People think it's contagious. My faith, my culture will not accept it. I will catch a gay disease, i.e. HIV, AIDS. Internalized transphobia, I will never pass. No one will ever love me. I will be harmed because of who I am. I will never have friends or a job. I hate my body or my voice. My body will never be the right fit. My family will never accept me. I will never feel safe. Already, you can hear these hard core beliefs, these hard nevers, these hard lines, black and white thinking. But we're also want to make sure that we validate at the same time. Never shame, but validate that it makes sense that you might feel this way with what you have seen, with what you have experienced. On the next slide, we're going to talk about more about core beliefs. Core beliefs are a person's most central ideas about themselves, others in the world. Core beliefs are the lens that others see how they navigate every situation and life experience. It explains how two people can be in the same situation but think and feel and behave very differently. One another important factor is oftentimes core beliefs are inaccurate, irrational, and lead to negative thinking patterns, feelings, and behaviors. whereas rational core beliefs lead to balanced reactions. The quickest way of identifying a core belief is that it is unhelpful and it is untrue. Examples include, I am a failure, I am unlovable, the world is dangerous, no one likes me, nothing ever goes right. Consequences of core belief, a person might have difficult trusting others, exhibit feelings of inadequacy in relationships, excessive jealousy, being over confrontational or aggressive, and might be at risk at putting others' needs above their own, which all contributes to depression, anxiety, substance use, inability to manage stress, and low self-esteem. These feelings are isolating. They separate us from our support groups, which of course leads to loneliness, depression, anxiety. Inability to manage your stress because of you're cut off from everyone and alone is only going to reinforce these beliefs, these feelings of low self-esteem. And substance use is often used as a way of curbing those feelings and disassociating. These feelings are not born, these are learned. Core beliefs usually develop in childhood during stressful or traumatic periods in adulthood. And information that is learned that contradicts core beliefs is often ignored. Negative core beliefs are not true, even if they feel true. Core beliefs tend to be rigid and long-standing. However, they can be changed. A core belief must be balanced for long-term change. Like we talked about earlier, it must hold the negative and the positive in both hands.
Yeah, one way that we use cognitive behavioral treatment is to do so to change behavioral patterns. These strategies might include facing one's fear instead of avoiding them, using role playing to prepare for a potentially problematic interaction with another, learning to calm one's mind and relax one's body. CBT therapists emphasize what is going on in the person's current life rather than what led up to their difficulties. A certain amount of information about one's history is needed, but the focus is primarily moving forward in time to develop more effective ways of coping. And to learn someone's core beliefs, this is done so most commonly through Socratic questioning. Socratic questioning is a method used by CBT therapists in identifying negative thinking patterns and the origin of one's core belief. I don't know if you all have heard of the philosopher Socrates. That's where this concept comes from. So it's all about asking open-ended questions to gain more information of the why and what's going on and what's around that core belief. Some examples of those questions are, is there evidence for this thought? Is there evidence against it? Could I be misinterpreting this situation? Might other people make different interpretations of the same situation? Am I looking at all the evidence, or what supports this thought? Another one could be, am I having this thought out of habit, or do facts actually do support it? So going and asking those questions to discover what's underlying there. Another way is practicing the use of coping skills to anticipate future triggers. By doing so, giving tools to the client or the individual so that they can help themselves and can feel that sense of autonomy. CBT interventions also include problem-solving skills. This could be identifying a problem, generating a list of possible solutions to this problem, evaluating the strengths and weaknesses to each possible solution, and choosing a solution to implement for the problem, and then actually implementing that solution is the next step. So again, to give the person a sense of autonomy and control. And another intervention used is self-monitoring. And this is seen when you give a client a use or a daily chart or a weekly chart to scale their feelings. Normally the scale is from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst you've ever felt, and 10 being I'm on top of the world, everything's great, and scaling the feelings that way. That's a great way to find a baseline for where the person's at, and also see if coping skills are actually helping and actually implementing change. Yeah. Next slide. Does anybody have any other questions? We're throwing a lot of content out, a lot of interventions. Does anyone have any questions at all?
All right, go ahead and put a thumbs up for us if you're ready. Thank you, thank you. All right, here we go, here we go. Then we'll go ahead and go with the next slide. So we are here to talk about trauma-focused cognitive behavior and why it is different. Trauma-focused CBT is an evidence-based treatment that helps folks address the negative effects of trauma, including processing the traumatic memories and overcoming problematic thoughts and behaviors, while developing effective coping and interpersonal skills. When complex trauma is involved, the more effective treatment approach would be trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. So complex trauma describes both a child's exposure to multiple traumatic events, which are often invasive and interpersonal in nature, and a wide-ranging long-term effects of this exposure. These events are severe and pervasive, such as abuse or profound neglect. They usually occur early in life and can disrupt many aspects of the child's development and the formation of a sense of self. Since these events often occur with the caregiver, they interfere with the child's ability to form a secure attachment. Many aspects of a child's healthy physical and mental development rely on this primary source of safety and stability. Earlier, we talked about how when you are not able to cope with the daily stresses, you are not able to connect with others, feelings of depression and anxiety might increase, and you might turn to substance use to help with those feelings of coping. Attachment is related to that. You're unable to attach, you're unable to attune, you're going to look elsewhere. TFCBT is an evidence-based short-term treatment that helps children and young youth address issues of complex trauma. Usually sessions of TFCBT can range from 12, 18, 20 sessions. That's pretty quick turnaround. Once again, we're addressing traumatic memories, overcoming problematic thoughts and behaviors while developing coping and interpersonal skills. And this involves caregivers as an important role in treatment. It assists caregivers in learning skills related to stress management, positive parenting, behavior management, and effective communication. This is important because often, like we talked about earlier, caregivers, parents are somehow involved in the trauma, whether they were watching or non-offending, or maybe they were on substance use and were an offending partner in the trauma. And often sometimes it's parents who don't know any better. They don't have access to parental education. And we know that generational trauma is passed down. If you were trained to be a certain type of parent because that's the parent you had, that's the tools you're going to lead to. TFCBT knows this, works with this, and provides skills to parents so they can take this lasting change within themselves, whether that be finding their own therapy to address their trauma, but definitely working hand in hand with the therapist. If this is a supportive parent, that is kind of the key of all of this. TFCBT has been demonstrated to be effective in a variety of environments, clinical settings, foster care, in-home, schools, with children and families from diverse cultural backgrounds, and for individuals experiencing different traumas types, physical, sexual abuse, domestic violence, disasters, traumatic grief, including multiple trauma types or exposures. And this is very vital in our report and in our work here at Elevate, as folks in our focused populations have multiple intersectional identities, and each of these identities come with a potential for adverse effects. In other words, it increases the potential for folks to experience multiple traumas. If we know that our Black and trans population youth experience high level of suicide, and it could be related to the intersection of their Blackness and experiencing trauma and their transness. These things compound and interact with each other. We have our next slide.
As Brittany mentioned before, for TFCBT, it is really encouraged that there is a supportive parent that could be a part of treatment. Some key components when it comes to trauma-focused cognitive behavioral treatment are, and this acronym, we use practice. So P, so psychoeducation and parenting skills for the parent of the child or individual who is in therapy. Specifically teaching and discussing about child abuse in general and what that looks like, typical emotional and behavioral reactions to abuse, as well as training parents for positive parenting skills, and child behavioral management strategies, and also effective communication goes a long way. R is relaxation techniques. So teaching relaxation methods such as focused breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, visual imagery, which can also benefit the parent as well. So this is like where we're giving tools to the parent and also the client. And in A, effective expression and regulation, this is where we help the child and parent manage their emotional reactions to the reminders of the abuse, to improve their ability to identify and express emotions, and are starting to participate in self-soothing activities. Like that's why R is so important to go before all of this. Having those tools to go back to is really, really beneficial and the core of this work. And so C, cognitive coping and processing. So this is where we're helping the child and the parent understand the connection between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors by exploring and correcting inaccurate or unhelpful attributes related to everyday events. And then T is trauma narration and processing. So this is where we're conducting gradual exposure exercises, including verbal, written, or other creative recounting of abusive events and processing inaccurate or unhelpful thoughts about the abuse. This is where we start challenging thought and those cognitive distortions about what happened in that trauma. And And then the next step would be in vitro exposure. So this is where we're gradually exposing the client to trauma reminders in the child's environment. For example, if the child's trauma happened at home, then it could be really difficult to be at home and regulate the self while being at home. So through that, we would like to gradually expose the child to the room. So that could be done first by talking about the room, and then seeing a picture of the room, and then gradually maybe 30 seconds in the room, and then we come out, whatever they can regulate. So the key part here is to teach those regulation skills, so that the child learns how to control his or her emotional reactions. And then C is conjoint parent and child sessions. So this is where family work comes into play more. And this is to enhance communication and create opportunities for therapeutic discussion regarding the abuse, for the child to share his or her trauma narration and what their experience was of this abuse. Almost like calling out the elephant in the room, for the parent and the child to process that. And then E is enhancing personal safety and future growth. So education and training on personal safety skills, interpersonal relationships, healthy sexuality practices, and encouragement to use the new skills that they've learned in therapy and managing future stressors and trauma reminders is really essential. Working with LGBTQ plus folks, it is also important to meet parents where they're at, and because they do tend to reject their child's sexual orientation or gender identity, which could be due to some of the following reasons. They have concerns or the desire to protect their child from harm. As Brittany mentioned before, LGBTQ plus folks are more subjected to trauma, and safety is a risk. So a lot of the time parents fear for their child when they identify as LGBTQ plus, out of wanting to keep them safe. Another consideration is culturally based fear that something bad would happen to the child. Another one is misunderstanding that it's a choice, when it's the child's identity, and then having to believe that the child can change their identity. Because parents do play a huge role in implementing trauma-focused CBT, it is important to make attempts to psychoeducate parents on the harm caused by rejecting their children's identity and supporting them in ways that they can show more support. At the end of this presentation, we will give resources showing the implementation or impact of not affirming a child's identity. Yeah, we will go over that at the end. Next slide, please.
Okay, we want to check in with you guys. Any questions or thumbs up? All right, we're ready to go. We're ready to go. If any time you do have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll keep going. So we're going to go over who should be introduced to TFCBT. And TFCBT is appropriate for children, adolescents, and adults 3 to 18 who remember being exposed to at least one trauma. For example, child maltreatment, community violence, traumatic loss of a loved one, and those who have experienced the following: PTSD symptoms, elevated levels of depression, anxiety, shame, or other dysfunctional abuse-related feelings, thoughts, or developing beliefs. Trauma-related behavioral problems, including age, inappropriate sexual behaviors, non-offending parents or other caregivers. TFCBT may not be appropriate for those who need, or it has to be modified for the following populations: children and adolescents whose primary problems include severe conduct problems, aggressive or destructive behaviors. Children who are inappropriately or illegally using substances actively on an extensive basis. Children who are acutely suicidal. With this, let me continue. Adolescents who are currently exhibiting seriously cutting behaviors or engaging in other parasuicidal behaviors like non-fatal self-harming behaviors. TVCBT must be adapted for these populations only because we're dealing with the trauma narrative and possibly someone who was part of the trauma. That can, as we begin that process, it can trigger feelings of suicide because we're so closely involved in the events. Therefore, it's may not be appropriate for those who are already experiencing a suicidal ideation or attempts. We want to make sure that they are in a place that has to do with compliance and a willingness, a motivation, which is why children with aggressive or conduct disorders may not be appropriate. It's about compliance to the modality. Other significant behavioral problems that existed prior to the traumatic events, and those who may respond to a better approach, like a psychodynamic or narrative approach, it might be better for them to try a different type of approach to overcome these problems first. It is important to conduct a meaningful assessment of children who may be candidates for TFCBT to ensure they fit the profile of those in the target population and benefit for this intervention.
As we mentioned throughout this presentation, parent involvement is really important, and parent support throughout treatment. Here at the center, we try and make a group for everybody so that they can find a place here. We do offer a couple groups that are beneficial for parents. So there's Grupo La Familia at the LGBTQ Center OC. They meet every second Sunday of the month from 1 to 2:30 p.m. There's also our parenting processing group, which is really great for parents who have children identifying as LGBTQ plus or gender questioning. It is really confusing when your child comes out and sometimes you can't find the answers that are correct and evidence-based. What's nice about this group that it is correct and evidence-based and gives space for parents to express their worries and what's going on for them. This group meets every first and third Wednesday, from 5 to 6:30 on Zoom. We also cited PFLAG and PFLAG La Familia. And here you can find resources for information about the LGBTQ plus community. And then also Free Mom Hugs also addresses maternal traumas and has a lot of great information on there too. Yeah. Next slide.
And here we have our group schedule for the spring and summer. We have a QR code available for you guys just to scan it. On Mondays, we have Q Chat, which is a social support group from 2 to 3:30. And then we have Q Chat again in Espanol from 4:30 to 5:30. And then we have Breakout, which is a mental health processing group for teens from 12 to 17. I'm one of the co-facilitators for that group, and it's just for kids to get together, talk about school, talk about their life and how their identity or interacts with how they navigate their lives. We also have Gender Flood, which is 18 plus, social support and educational from 5 to 6:30 p.m. And then Prism, which is also 18 plus, which is a social support and educational group from 7 to 8:30. On Tuesdays, we have the advocacy group, Advocacy Through Art Coalition, which is more based on youth leadership, which is 5:30 to 7 p.m. On Wednesdays, we have the queer men's group, which is 18 plus. First Wednesday, social support, which is 4 to 5 p.m., excuse me. We have Study with Pride, which is more educational, 3 to 6 p.m. Citizen, social support and educational, 4:30 to 6 p.m. And Rainbow Group, which is another social support and education group, starts at 6:30 to 8 p.m. On Thursdays, we have Outlet, which is 18 plus, which my friend and presenter Jordan leads. It's a mental health processing group, like Breakout, but it's for 18 plus. Then we have our Elevate, Youth Empowered to Act, which is again youth leadership from 5:30 to 7 p.m. On Fridays, we have In-Betweeners, which happens on the first Friday, 5 to 6:30. South County Rainbow Group. This one is first Friday, which is 5 to 6:30. Breaking Binaries, which is on the third Friday, 5 to 3:30, and Rainbow Connection at the high school, which is 4 to 6 p.m. We also have our team on the other hand side to screenshot, so you can get in contact with us as well. We can go ahead and go to the next slide.
And here's just a couple of our resources that we use throughout this presentation. If you want to check any of them out, there is the cares.beckinstitute.org, where we got a lot of our information about cognitive behavioral therapy. And then we have therapistaid.com. They also do have a lot of information and worksheets that can be used for cognitive behavioral therapy and processing thoughts. A lot of good graphics of those cognitive distortions that I described earlier. We also have positivepsychology.com. And here we have some cognitive behavioral techniques that we drew from. And then also Psychology Today. If you want to get in contact with a therapist that specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy within Orange County, that's a good place to check out. There's also feelgood.com. That's where a lot of positive psychology is promoted. Another good resource. And then the trevorproject.org. This is another great resource if, for statistics and evidence-based statistics for the LGBTQ plus community and the impact of trauma and how important it is to be affirming to these youth. Yeah. The next slide, we have a post test. If you could take out your cameras and scan that now. And it's, I believe, the same test you took for the pre-test, 9 questions. So yeah, we could do that right now. We'll give some time and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, questions about us, what we do here at the program, or anything like that as well.
I have a question. Are the support groups and kind of like the calendar that you showed us earlier, are those fee-based? Are they free? Like, what does that look like for if I want to share for a client there? What does that look like for them?
Under Elevate, these are all free groups. I think, yeah, these are all of our Elevate programs, and these are all free. So
Awesome.
most of them are kind of a drop-in basis, except for Breakout. There is a quick pre-interview, and but other than that, kids are feel free to drop in when they can, and they don't have to stay the entire time. Some kids sneak in a couple minutes and then drop out. But so yeah, feel free.
Um, I also have a question about the processing group that you mentioned that you do with is it the students or kids? So I'm a school-based therapist at a high school, and we're also looking to start been starting a LGBTQ plus group, but we wanted like what would be some recommendations or tips on like how to begin the group or topics to talk about?
Yeah, actually, we have Abby and Cesar. I think I see you in there as well. We have our team will come out and talk to you about like how to build these groups. I
Oh,
don't know, Cesar, if you wanted to hop in real quick.
you mentioned the LGBTQ centers in Orange County, but
Yes.
we're
So Santa Ana.
Santa Ana. Okay. So we're in Woodland Hills. So then would we reach out to the center in LA or West Hollywood, I believe? Or would you guys still come from Santa Ana to Woodland Hills?
That's a great question. Actually, let me get back to you from Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind dropping your information in the chat and directing it direct messaging me or Jordan, and we'll see what we can do if it's us that we can connect to, or we'll see what we can do. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, awesome. Appreciate that. Thank you.
So Zara, I wanted to give you an opportunity to jump in.
Oh, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Cesar Hernandez. I am one of the youth program assistants at the LGBTQ Center. And so I help oversee some of the youth and young adult programs that we saw in that schedule recently. So if there's any questions that I can help out with, I'd be happy to help out.
Any other questions or about what we do here at the center or about TFCBT and how that kind of affects our population? All right, all right. I see some head nods. Give me my thumbs up. Excellent, excellent. Okay, then our last slide is our information and just a thank you for coming and participating in our first part of our series. We're going to go into more in-depth interventions and resources in part 2. And we very much hope to see you guys there. The date will be released pretty soon. I believe it's already in one of the on one of the flyers. Here's my information and Jordan, and we also have the center's link up there as well. I hope that you guys had time to complete the post test, and it helps us so we know what we're doing, what you guys are interested in. And thank you guys so much for coming. Whether I think we will have a recording of the slides available. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you for stopping in.
Of course.